Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. I got a good one today, folks. No, actually, I have a great one. My guest today on the podcast is Kat Cole. Kat is the president and chief operating officer at Athletic Greens. And before joining Athletic Greens in 2021, Kat ran an assortment of brands we all know and love, like Cinnabon and Auntie Anne's, Moe's, Schlotzsky's, McAllister's, and Carvel. And I will ask you, I'm going to ask it now during my intro, which I never do. Are you a Fudgy the Whale gal?
I I respect Fudgy and the legacy of Fudgy, which is almost four generations deep as a 96-year-old brand. But I was more of a Cinnabon Minibon girl, but as I've gone on my own health journey,
But
I'm
when
more,
you have a cheat day,
yeah, you always get a cheat day. I am more of either Auntie Anne's salted pretzel nuggets or
mm,
a Jamba vanilla blue sky
not even a
smoothie.
not even a cookie puss here and there.
Mm-mm.
All right. And Kat got to start waitressing at Hooters. I've never done the mid intro question, so that's first. And Kat got to start waitressing at Hooters, Great Wings. And we're going to get into her super inspiring story of rising through the ranks and eventually to become the vice president of Hooters America. She's known for creating insane amounts of growth wherever she goes. And I'm excited to dig in into how that's translated into her newest chapter over at Athletic Greens. So let's get to it. Kat Cole, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, we got the Carvel questions out of the way, and I'm not going to be personally offended. I am my birthday, Father's Day, it's Fudgy. Like there's
Grow
no
up in
combination of
New York.
oh yeah, born and
Yeah.
raised New Yorker. There's the combination of the crunch, the fudge, the chocolate ice cream, the amalgamation, and it's just
And the
perfection.
memories. You're eating the memories.
I met for 44 years eating memories of fudge. So let's get to it. I want to hit the rewind button quickly because I think it's important to tell your story of how you got to where you are today and paint a full picture of what you've accomplished. And we talk about humble beginnings growing up, and you call this the dark side of humility. Um, if you don't mind, as much as you're open to sharing, what does that mean? I'd love if you could kind of take us back and a glimpse into your upbringing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm the oldest of three girls. So I have two younger sisters. And when I was 9 years old, my mom came to me and said, "That's it. I'm done. We're leaving." And what she meant was we were leaving my father. He was and is a very sweet man, but at the time, an alcoholic, a terrible husband and father, a long list of ways that impacted our family. Yet, my mom, for many years, again, I was 9, my sisters were 3 and 6 at the time.
Little.
And this was not a new phenomenon, the alcoholism. It was ever present in her community and his community and our family. And for many years, she was told and therefore believed that she was lucky. Um, and the reason she was told that she was lucky is that everyone dealt with alcoholism, except all sides of my family were very, very poor, except us. My dad had a white collar job. And so we had a house instead of a trailer, or on the streets. We had a car. I even had a playhouse in the backyard. And as you can imagine, to all sides of the family, that looked like Richie Rich.
Luxury.
And so, their point of view, my aunts, my cousins, my grandmas said to my mom, "We all have to deal with the bad side. At least you get the nice stuff." And so she convinced herself that she should just be grateful. She should be grateful for what she had. She should be thankful that it wasn't worse. And the reality is, it could have been worse in many ways. But she just flipped from one day being in the dark side of gratitude, which is convincing yourself you should be grateful, to the tune of convincing yourself you don't deserve better. And she went to the light side. And while I'm grateful that things aren't worse, it doesn't mean that I don't have the right, or in some cases, the responsibility to make them better. And she became dissatisfied enough, determined enough, even though she didn't have the answers, to decide to leave. Again, all sides of family were very poor, so there was nowhere to go. And so she had to figure it out on her own. She had a very low wage paying hourly job at the time. And so the headline there is there was no external safety net. There was no external financial resource. And we left. And when she told me that, I didn't cry and I get upset. I said something to her like, "What took you so long?" At the age of 9.
I'm only
And,
laughing because I read that in I read that in your biography. I'm like, to have that kind of mindset at 9 years old, right?
I think though
For
there's probably kids even younger than me that have even more clarity when you're around it and you're in it. And her fear was, I'm taking my kids away from their father and I'm removing us from our financial security. But the reality is, at least at that point, we didn't really have a father to be taken away from. It's in her
wasn't missing anything.
Yeah, in her mind, the concerns
How,
were real and valid, but my reaction was affirmation that she knew the right thing to do all along. We left, she fed us on a food budget of $10 a week for 3 years. She worked 3 jobs, like on and on and on. We figured it out, but that is the source of the concept of the dark side of gratitude.
I certainly appreciate you sharing that openness and vulnerability. Were there moments in there when you look back at it now, Kat, where you're like, the resilience, resourcefulness, that's all from mom.
Yeah.
I got that shit when I was young. That was embedded into your DNA and into your soul. Was there ever a need to have a strong male figure in your life? Were there friends, uncles, aunts around, uncles? Were there anybody that did you feel like
Yeah.
there was a
I
need
mean,
for that? The
even my
balance?
dad, for all his faults, um, had some beautiful characteristics as a male that are in me that I still resonate with today. He was very carefree, incredibly loving and social, even more so when he was drunk. Um, and so there were some really beautiful elements. I would say the other male figures on my dad's side were as bad or worse. He
Mm,
was a little bit of the shining light in a way. Um,
happy drunk,
and
hopefully.
yeah, and so, but there were others, especially as I started working and leaders, although most of the bosses or managers I had when I was young were women, interestingly. I started in retail. A majority of those leaders at the time, were female. I worked at Hooters. Many of the managers are female because they work their way up from being a Hooters girl. So I actually only had a handful of male bosses my entire career. But yeah, tons of just incredible people I would meet, mentors. Actually, I met a lot of incredible male mentors in my nonprofit work with the Georgia Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association. Even in the Women's Food Service Forum, I met some of the most incredible male leaders who were advocates. They were a minority of the community. But
Allies.
the fact that they were there, is a testament to how instrumental they were in the development of many people's careers and women's careers. So yeah, I had a ton, but most of
That's
my life,
encouraging.
my force was from lots of different types of female leaders.
So let's talk about those early careers, and especially for anybody out there who's in retail or food service, and they may not have a formal education, they may not have a college education. I mean, you started as a waitress, you worked your way up, and from what I read, you were hands on. You would step in when the line cooks were out, the bartender wasn't there. Did that just come naturally to just be like a go getter? I'm going to step in. I'm going to take care of shit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, upon reflection, because the story played out so interestingly, and I get asked questions, so it's afforded me the opportunity to reflect quite a bit. And upon reflection, there were three, whatever you want to call them, mindsets or characteristics at play
Please share.
that led to the jumping in. One is I genuinely wanted to be helpful. I'm a helper. Like someone needs help.
Cup filler, as my daughter would like to say, cup
Yeah,
filler.
I'm there. You need help. I'm there. Doesn't matter the job, doesn't matter the place. And so that's driver number one, likely. Number two is I am super curious to see if I can figure things out. So, especially if I am helping someone and it's something I've never done. One, if you're helping someone in need, the bar is pretty low for how good you need to be. And it actually de risks you jumping in. Like,
Okay, yeah.
you do a job, like you're a podcaster, right? I've never hosted a podcast. But if you and I were buds and I worked in your studio and something happened, and you're like, the show has to go on. We have to record it. I would be like, one,
You could do it.
the bar is not going to be high for me to be amazing.
I
You're
think
just
you'd be
going to be
okay.
happy that someone carries it on.
Anytime you want to take over, Kat, the show is yours, please. Anytime you want
And
to guest host.
yeah, I leave it to the pros. And it was actually quite a safe way to learn new things by jumping in and helping people. But I was curious, can I fry those chicken wings? And the joke is when they float, they're done. It's actually true.
It
Can
seems easy.
I know enough to be dangerous, but can I do it? So there was curiosity, a bit of proving it to myself as driver number 2. And driver number 3, at least in those situations, is I was selfish, because the more shifts I could work, the more access to income I had, which
Mm-hmm.
more money I could make.
Pull you
So
up.
there was an altruistic element, there was a self-serving element, and then there was just this growth curiosity element. And then I went back and helped the cooks cook, and then I could work kitchen shift, and I could train kitchen employees, and when the manager needed help, I helped him close a shift, and then I could be a shift leader. And the same thing happened with the bartender and the host. And then before I
So,
knew it, I knew how to run a restaurant. That
so
wasn't
now,
my goal, it was the outcome.
right, but so now you're in a management role. You are now managing your first restaurant. Kat, what was one of those first early lessons learned the hard way, as I like to say? Maybe a misconception about management, maybe like how you thought you should lead and coach people and you were freaking dead wrong or off.
I think what was interesting is I never moved permanently into the store manager role. I was always toggling between Hooters girl, bartender, cook, and manager. And there's something, until I moved into the corporate office, and there is something interesting when you have to continue to be a peer and a partner of all these roles. It's not like you're ascending into management and you're like on high, and now I've got to make this. So it gave me an unfair advantage as a manager, because I could relate and I didn't get too big for my britches, because I was about to be in the other britches. At the same time, it made it harder. It made it harder to have that line of respect. It made it harder to have that, like, who are you to tell me what to do? Like,
But you also earned it. You also paid your dues. You were in the kitchen. You were cleaning up. I'm sure you were mopping shit. You were dealing with asshole customers. You were in it. You were kicking people out. You were getting wings done. You were doing all that stuff there. So you earned it, right?
Humans are still going to human. Just because you earned it doesn't mean everybody appreciates that you earned it. And so that might be the lesson, is that when you have the responsibility of something, not everyone is going to believe you need to be there. Or, some people start out giving you 100% respect, and then it's yours to lose. Others are on the other side, which is like, earn it, prove it all the way along the way. And when you run a restaurant and there's 20 people on a shift, statistically speaking, there's a good mix of different types of people. So
especially in the service industry, that attracts a wide range of personalities, characters, backgrounds.
But even in
corporate America, of course,
like,
assholes everywhere.
It really helps. It helped me build the muscle. And the part that was harder is that different people need to be led differently. There are some universal truths of management and leadership, and then there are other things that are variable based on the tenure, the personality, the environment, the dynamic, the conditions. And so I just learned a lot of tough leadership lessons at an insanely young age. I was 18 when this was happening. And then I started traveling around the world, opening franchises when I was 19. It's even a different level of responsibility.
We're gonna get to that in a second, but complete side note before I forget: have you watched The Bear on Hulu FX? The Bear,
a couple episodes.
Right, so you get the sense of the food. Okay, so we talk about this concept of promoting from within, right? And you literally started at the bottom at Hooters, and now you get called. What's the story? You get called to open up the first restaurant Hooters in Australia. Was there a cultural, how did you start to deal with the cultural, listen, Hooters back then, we're not going to put a date on it, right? There's a reputation, there's a brand image. You're going into different countries, different cultural assimilation, pros, cons going on over there. What was it like to open up from a cultural perspective in a new country? I'm sure you did some research on it, but like, Was it welcome with open arms? What was that like?
It was a mixed bag. There were lovers and there were haters.
Mm-hmm.
And then people in between. It was so fun. I mean, it was one, a bit of a height of the fever around the brand. And
Mm-hmm.
so while it was polarizing and controversial in some ways, it was also really exciting and interesting to a lot of people. And so that was really fun, being at the center of that intrigue and knowing the truth of the inside versus what different people may perceive from the outside. And, the countries varied. In Australia, if you think about Sydney, Woolloomooloo, the area where we opened at the time, lots of Navy, military, lots of sports restaurants. So it kind
Right.
of fit right in. You had a lot of rugby players coming in. You had a lot of
Right.
families.
So there was a good fit. There was a good
It was a
cultural
great
brand
fit.
fit.
Oh, it was a great fit. And there were still a lot of things that were different. Just because they speak English doesn't mean it's this perfect translation.
Some of the menu
Um,
items might have been different that didn't translate, right?
Menu
I mean,
items, music, bar, sports, even the uniforms a little different. But then, go to the second franchise location I opened. So after I got back from Sydney, I was asked to go to Mexico and open the first one ever in Central America. And we had a full bar. We had liquor. And for anyone who doesn't know, for most of Hooters' existence, it was only beer and wine. And
I
which made
didn't
it,
know that.
people thought of it as this like, you know, people are going there getting wasted. I mean, they did, but it was beer. It was pitchers of beer.
Right.
I have a full bar now, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of something very cool and bringing that to the brand and like modernizing the brand in that
Mm-hmm.
way. But it was just beer and wine,
It's a sports
global,
bar. Yeah.
and then sports bar. And so then we go to Mexico, and people are having
Oh,
sangrita with lunch, and we've got to train
ooh.
people on making cocktails, and because that's normal. It was
That
normal.
that
That is
flavor profile between spicy hot wings and it works. Depends what you're pairing it with.
Yeah. And people coming in watching soccer matches, which is a very different level of energy, or football, a very different level of energy than most American sports
Mm-hmm.
watching. And it was downtown and in Insurgentes in Zona Rosa in Mexico City. And there was just this like, it was different. It was very different. And there's a different culture around women in in Mexico and in Central American cultures, and in some ways more loving and um, paternal, maternal, and connected, and in other ways more sexualized, right? So you had some very different dynamics at play, a little more like machismo, a little more. So there were different dynamics to play. And then when I launched the first one in South America, which was in Buenos Aires, whoo,
A
that
little bit
one.
more.
I mean, we just missed the mark on
So
menu
yes,
planning.
yes. Let's talk about that, right? Like understanding the cultural differences too, especially when it comes to religious. Like, listen, countries have their vices, countries have their certain things, but when you start to play with religion being encapsulating of a whole country and the perception of brands and restaurants, I mean, I'm sure the brand. I mean, correct me if I'm on this. Brand research, brand insights, and everything. Did they just say fuck it, or like was like shit? We went in here and we missed the mark. Like, how'd you guys miss the mark?
I mean, there was research, but it wasn't that sophisticated. And we were a franchise model. So you're relying on the local owner
Correct.
to have the knowledge, to make the interpretation, to bridge the gap, but you don't get everything right. And of course, being a brand that was new to going into new countries, the brand was likely overprotective of some things like menu items, like, no, this is a Hooters menu item and we have to have exactly this because that's the brand. And you had the franchisees wanting to change everything. And somewhere in the middle is the right answer. Um, but when we got down there to open that restaurant, and I was leading that opening, so I was already now leading. I was 19 or just turned 20. And one of the, I'd done all these openings in different countries, 4 or 5, a couple in the US. Um, and it was a mess. It was very, very difficult. The equipment was not appropriate for the food standards there. We had a shitty ribeye flat, like ribeye steak that you grilled on a flat top in order to make a
Just
sandwich. And
off.
this is the beef capital of the world. And when
Yeah.
they saw the recipe to put
Like, what are you doing to this
steak
meat?
on a flat top, not over fire,
What are you doing to this meat? Sacrilegious.
yeah, not only
Throw in
what
the towel.
yeah, not only what are you doing to this meat, but this isn't meat, right? Like this is the beef capital of the world. And so real time, we had to figure out like we need to get in a flame broiler, we need to improve the steak selection. And making changes, and I was drawing new plate setups and faxing it to the corporate office to get them to approve, and trying to call, and then just being a
That's
maverick with the franchisee and
love it.
changing stuff, and then hoping I
Nice.
wasn't going to get fired when somebody showed
Oh
up to the
God.
store. And it was wild. It was so much
I
fun. It was incredible learning, and it was very hard. I was in tears every night just from exhaustion, just the stress of the
can't even
changes,
imagine.
pivoting, but it was also magical.
Of course. And as I'm telling the cat Cole story here, these threads that everyone listening there, the resiliency, the resourcefulness. Cinnabon comes knocking. Did they find you? Did you find them? Was that a talk? Let's talk, because this show is deeply rooted in the career journey too. Talk about that. Let's talk about it. Like, did they come to you? Were you recruited? How did that work?
So, like many things, there were breadcrumbs along the way in a journey that led to a moment. And if you just talk about the moment, the recruitment, it seems like, oh, well, this magic just happens to her out of nowhere. And the roots of this are, I while I was at Hooters, and I was there for just under 15 years,
It's a long time.
and from 96 to 2010. And I was vice president for 6 years. Those last 6 years of the company, I became vice president when I was 26 years old,
Awesome.
and one of the VPs of the company. And I was overseeing training and development, and then that evolved over time. And so, one, built a reputation in the industry. And so typically leaders who have a positive reputation doing good things in business get recruited. And I was getting recruited, but nothing was super interesting, because Hooters, what what was unique about it outside of the obvious, what's not obvious about how it was unique, is it was privately owned, fully vertically integrated. We had manufacturing, supply chain, an airline, casinos. We owned our own food distribution. Like, I had multiple lifetimes of careers in that company. It was
Some
very hard for another company to rival the learning and the opportunities that I had there. It's why I stayed. So, one of the many reasons I stayed as long as I did. And and it's not like there were Wharton MBAs beating down the door to go work at Hooters. So people on the inside got the opportunities, like
promote
me
from within. Promote from
and
within.
many others. And I had incredible leaders there. Um, and so, in addition to my reputation in the industry, I volunteered for restaurant associations. And as I mentioned, the Women's Food Service Forum
NRA.
advocated for people. And the result of that is you build networks outside of your company, which allowed people to see me as an industry leader, not just as somebody who worked at Hooters on their resume.
Thought you were a thought leader.
Yeah. And so as a result,
Visibility, brand, early brand building, personal
yeah.
brand building.
And as a result, I started getting recruited, and by people I worked on projects with, not just somebody from the outside. So we became friendly. We had dinners, we had lunches, and
They knew you. You knew them. You knew what they were working on. You knew about their brand. So it was
familiarity.
conversations. It was conversations leading up to it.
And then I got a phone call, and from someone at Rourke Capital and Focus Brands, the parent company of Cinnabon at the time, still today. And they said, we'd like you to consider interviewing for the president of, or actually, no. First, I had the opportunity to go work in private equity at Rourke. And this leader, Steve, who was the outgoing CEO of Focus Brands and incoming executive at Rourke, the private equity firm, reached out to me from this network of food service and franchise volunteering and said, I'm building out a franchise practice at Rourke. Would love to talk to you about this role. And so I went deep down the interview process for that role, and was super excited about it. I mean, for a girl who grew up child of a single parent alcoholic father, worked at Hooters her whole life, private
Big
equity
job.
sounded pretty fancy. And I thought Steve was an amazing human. And so the idea of working with him, the idea of making this leap was incredibly enticing. And then the day he called me to offer me the job was the exact same day, just an hour or two before that we found out we had to sell Hooters. The CEO had died unexpectedly, and the son had
Talk
taken
about
over.
timing.
Uh,
Coincidence.
yeah, the estate did not get settled,
Alignment
and
of the
so
universe.
the judge ruled we had to liquidate the most valuable asset in the estate, which was Hooters of America. And we had like, I don't remember, but 90 days for a reasonable commercial effort. And so we had to sell the company. And I said to Steve when he called, I'm like, I think this sucks and I can't believe I'm saying it. And there's no good time to leave, but this is a terrible time to leave. And I can't do that
Oh my
to the
God.
company. And I am
Loyalty.
so bummed. And but you do the right thing for the right reasons and it pays back in dividends. And
Of
to your
course.
point, over time, I didn't realize it at the time, but certainly it sent the message that if I'm in a company and I have an owner's mindset, I'm not going to leave them in a lurch in their time of need. And I stayed. And several months later, he called back and said, look, I know you can't come now for this role, but we're on a flexible timeline, but we're going to be interviewing for a president of Cinnabon in the portfolio. I think you should interview for it. And I went to the CEO of Hooters and said, look, I know we're in this transaction. I'm probably not going to get this job given who I've heard is in the running, but I think I should interview. And
It's
Kobe
time
was
for you to
one.
look for yourself right now.
Yeah. And Kobe
You've
was fantastic. The son, the CEO of Hooters, he's like,
But you've given them your all, Kat. You've given them your all, right? Like you've given it, like you got them to like you stayed when you were liquidating. Like it's like, all right, now it's time to look out for number one, and hopefully they respected that, and they did, and they got you where you got.
he was amazing. He's like, look, I don't want to tell anyone because this is still a delicate time in the company. But I support you. Just help me get this deal closed. And I promised him I will not leave
Get
until we
across
get a
the
strong
line.
offer on the company. And as luck would have it, I was offered the role as president of Cinnabon. And I may get my exact dates wrong, it gets fuzzy, but April or May of 2010. And I did not start until October of 2010. They held the job for me five,
Well,
6 months in order for me to honor that commitment.
so you could close up shop there. So there's a question that's just been for years. I've been thinking about this one. When I go into the mall, are they releasing the smells of Cinnabon and Auntie Anne's like are they blowing it with fans to drive the traffic to the, it's I've never smoked crack in my life, and I think that's the closest thing to I'm
Ah,
ever going to smoke crack in my life is sorry, I don't mean to make a drug reference, but it's like this smell is just like every fiber of my body feels those two unique smells
yeah,
and lined with the brands.
it's powerful. I mean, one, the aroma is coming from the fact that in both brands, the ovens are out front. So think about when you open up an oven in your house and you're baking cookies, right? You smell
Mm,
it, and that's just one time opening it. Think about if you're just all day baking fresh. That's what the aroma is from. I mean, there are vents, of course, but we don't have to have hoods in those
right.
locations.
It's
It's
not
a
flame.
most of them, and so that
Kind of
that is
works.
pretty powerful.
How do
The
people work there?
olfactory senses, the connection between the nose and the
Oh,
brain, the memories of fresh baked grandma's house, like anything, is really, really overwhelming and
okay,
effective.
so dealer's choice. You could only eat one for the rest of your life. Is it the bun or the pretzel?
Mm.
I mean, Sophie's choice right
I
here.
mean, as someone who built these two beloved brands for many years, I refuse to choose. I refuse.
I'm gonna let you recuse yourself from this one here. So, different company, different company that you're going into, different culture, different everything. Was that hard for you to assimilate into a new culture? Like, was it hard for you to balance out? All right, I'm a leader. How much am I gonna balance listening first versus taking action and kind of putting my signature and stamp on this new organization?
I mean, I've learned, at least for me, I can't have a plan like that. It is relative to the needs of the company, the person, the moment, and fine tuning these four mindsets: humility, curiosity, courage, and confidence, and learning how to be self aware and be aware of others, and then turn the volume up or down on those mindsets or characteristics. And so it's quite situational. There are times to shut up and listen, and there are times to ask others to do that. And there are times to be iterative, uh,
Mm-hmm.
based on what you hear, and then making decisions and then learn more. And
It's
it's just like
annoying.
loops. But it's based on the situation. I didn't get in my head about it. I knew I was there to lead. The business was in a lot of trouble. Cinnabon, the business based in malls and airports had just gone through the Great Recession and was still on the tail end of it. And there were real top line pressures and declining profitability and defaults. And
Serious business issues that needed to be addressed.
I mean, the brand was beloved
But
and the product was as disturbingly delicious and authentic as it was the day it was invented. But the
never
business
changed.
model was FUBAR.
So, but you
So
did,
much work that was needed.
but you brought such innovation, like taking these ideas from tech, like hackathons and all these kind of outside the box. I mean, how is that received from a corporate level, and how is that received from a customer level? When you came outside the box here with like, hey, this shit's working with other places. Why not we give it a try here?
I mean, most people loved it eventually. Um, but the reality is, all the innovative ideas came from somewhere or someone or something already sprouting in the company. There were very
The
few
seeds were
things.
planted.
There were very few things that were like Kat's brilliant idea, and no one was doing any version of it. And then I had to start at not even zero, but -1.
Hmm.
Most things were an insight from an existing stakeholder that needed to be nurtured and fostered and accelerated and expanded and engaging everything from going into there were already grocery products. That wasn't my
It
brilliant
wasn't
idea
retail.
the first time, but I rallied people around it and figured out how a way to build a truly multi-channel brand mindset across the divisions of the company and the franchisees and the stakeholders, and build an innovation and commercialization engine that made shit happen at scale. And we could be small and innovative and the brand advocates, but we also built a team that knew how to work with the giants of
And
the
to
world.
move
Kellogg's. Um,
quick.
but it wasn't just those channel innovations. There were things we did in the franchise business, from third party delivery to technology to digital menu boards to smaller portions. I mean, it all came from seeing inspiration somewhere and then saying, wow, is that relevant to us? If it is
Can we apply it?
relevant now, if it's relevant now, is it something the business and the customer can value, handle, and appreciate? And then, where does it sit in the priorities of the operational plan? And then remembering that a business can only change at the speed that customers and employees can believe, and that the business can handle. And handle means financially handle, operationally execute. And so I wanted to go way faster
I was about
than
to say, how do you control the throttle as a leader? Like, how do you watch you're watching the engine, you're hitting the red, it's going in the red, but you want to push your team, but not too much. Like that's one of the hardest parts about leadership, is how hard to push your team moving things forward without burning them out
yeah.
and without crossing the line.
My philosophy was the wheels should shake, not can shake, should
Wheels
shake,
should shake.
but they should not come off. Right? The wheels should shake, but they should not come off. If we're a car and we're all in this car and we're pushing it and we're going fast and we're going over uncharted territory, the wheels should shake. That means we're going somewhere new, somewhere unpaved. We're going, but they should not come off, right? We
I
shouldn't be
like
like,
this. I like this analogy,
up.
Kat. Mm-hmm.
and so that means ultimately the mindset of the leader, at least for me, is about execution. Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's execution,
You can have
and
ideas all day long, but if you're not making shit happen, you're not doing anything.
and at the same time, people are capable of far more than they know. And so there is some sweet spot of pushing people beyond what they would do on their own accord, and not doing it so much because everyone has a different speed and a different capability. And when you're managing larger organizations, it's like layers and teams of people. So you've got to have a deep appreciation for how shit works. Um, so there's a sweet spot there that
Find the sweet spot.
you can only navigate it if you stay close to the
Love it.
action. If you get too removed, you'll make errors to one extreme or the other. Too slow, too safe, too fast, too sloppy.
This is a good stuff, people. Everyone listening out there. So I got to ask you about hiring, and I love to talk to senior leaders, experienced leaders like yourself. At this stage, when you're interviewing somebody, we're going to assume that they have the skill sets that they need for that role. So you're talking to them about character, personality, values. What are some of Cat Cole's kind of secret go-to questions and your kind of mindset and process to suss out someone is pretty relatively quickly Like, maybe you have 1 call, maybe you have 2 calls depending on the level, but how do you get there from a decision point?
It I don't necessarily have like secret questions, but it depends on where someone is in the interview process. You know, if I'm or typically I'm now in my role, I'm one of the last
Right.
legs. So the
Either
questions I used to ask when I was um, an earlier part of an interview panel or a more junior hiring manager are very, very different
Mhm.
than the questions I ask now.
So what are you
Where
asking now?
now I focus more on culture. And so I'm assuming if they've gotten to me that
They
they
could
have
do the job.
the technical test.
Right.
And I'll still ask my own questions, of course, on that. I don't abdicate that responsibility to others, but the percentage of the time where I focus my energy is on culture, cultural elements. How have they handled adversity? Tell me about a time when
Conflict.
you made a
Mhm.
mistake and what happened and how did it happen and what would you do differently, if you would go back. If I were to ask your most intimate friend or partner the characteristic they love about you and the characteristic that drives them crazy about you, what would they say? um and then one thing that I find quite interesting is when someone gets to me, I'm also typically at the point of selling and telling as well, right? Like I tell
It's a
people.
sales the employer is also selling on the candidate. Let's remember that. The interview is a two-way street, people.
And so I, again, if they get to me and if they're interviewing with me, they're likely some version of a leader or senior role. Um, I also want to tell them about the challenges in the company, almost to a more negative degree than is reality. I'd like someone to think about eyes wide open, come in,
Like,
understand.
almost talk them out of it and see what
Yeah,
they
like
Yeah.
this is every company has its mess. Like
Here's
bless
our shit. Yeah,
everybody.
here's
And so I talk about it quite openly and like to hear their questions or reactions. But one question that I'm surprised sometimes, even from senior leaders, that doesn't go the way I would think or hope is I ask people, look, I'm leaving a little bit of time. What questions do you have for me? And sometimes it is crickets. And and either they're nervous, and I always give people that grace, but it does make me wonder, uh, you know, do you have standards or have you gotten them all answered maybe by the time you get to me? And is it just a lack of curiosity? Ha-
that's a
so
flag for me.
that and because part of why I don't just ask the question to see if people have questions, I like to learn how people think. I want to know their thought
The
process. I want to,
process.
if they
Mhm.
ask a question that isn't clear why they're asking, I'll say, can you tell me more about, why that's on your mind? I'd love to know. Like it helps me interview the candidate and what
Mhm.
they will think about what they will be like. So it's fascinating when people are like,
Also, how
no,
you might manage them. Yeah.
no, I don't.
I'm good. I'm
You
good. You're like, "Really?"
Hey, all right.
That's a flag for me.
It's not a
So,
deal killer, it's very situational, but I am surprised at the times where I believe someone should have questions or could have questions and they don't.
Kat, we only have a few minutes left, so I really wanna make sure that I hit home a couple of things here. Okay, you're in this pretty awesome corporate job, revitalizing these brands, bringing them to life, infusing new ideas. Athletic Greens, where does this come from?
So I was at Focus in total for almost exactly 10 years. And in that time, I was president of Cinnabon for a handful of years and then hired a successor there and then took on the role of group president of the parent company, managing the licensing and e commerce and CPG division, which is what bridged me to CPG. So this is
Mhm.
the legs to
CPG
AG.
into DTC. Mhm.
And then I became president and COO of the parent company. So I was managing presidents of other brands, small ones, big ones. We grew by acquisition. So we not only grew the brands we had, we acquired brands like McAllister's, Jamba Juice, and Auntie Anne's while I was there and ran a big
God bless Auntie
international.
Anne's.
Yeah. Ran a big, the business was quite global, 70 plus countries at its peak. And at the same time, what I was doing very quietly that many people didn't know because I just didn't put it on blast is for about a decade, I had become an angel investor in early stage businesses. I started getting connected to founder led startups,
Mhm.
the next path to AG. I also got on my own personal health journey. I had my first child at 39. I had my second child at 41. I had a couple miscarriages before and in between. And even before that,
Hmm.
I was into health and wellness. And I was so delighted when the opportunity came for us to buy Jamba Juice and take it private and turn it into more of the still fun and delicious, but more of the wellness company it should be, with lower sugar, more plant-based
The
options.
quality, the
Yeah.
quality.
And so I, just because I was the president of Cinnabon, some people think, well, you can't be that into health and wellness, but I was. And we had other brands like Moe's Southwest Grill and McAllister's that we leaned into keto and paleo. And so there are lots of examples of how even my oversight of consumer businesses expanded to more health conscious brands, but then
The
quietly,
story was going that way. The
yeah,
thread, the momentum
years,
was pushing in
for
this
years.
direction.
And then my personal capital and time was going into mostly either health tech, better for you food and beverage, CPG, SMB tech, or omni-channel retail businesses. And I was on the board of Milk Bar and Slice, again, founder-led growth stage businesses. And by the time I get to 2021 and I take off a year, I'm like, I've been at Focus for 10 years. It's time to go.
You took a
I'm just going to
sabbatical.
advise other businesses. One of the people who reached out to me to advise them was Chris Ashenden, founder and CEO of AG, the maker of AG1, the all-in-one foundational nutrition supplement that basically nourishes all the body systems. It replaces a multivitamin, a probiotic, the green, it's like all in one step, powder, water, shake,
Boom.
feel amazing.
Link it
Um,
up.
yeah, so good. Drink
Big
AG1
fan over here.
slash cat, get you a deal. And so when he called and asked me to advise him, to have a conversation, I was already a customer. My husband's an ultra endurance athlete. I've tried it before. I was a
Being
big,
a customer and advocate of a company you're going to work for, there's nothing better.
huge. And so we started weekly calls. And at first I was like, this company is a little small, for me. I'm so happy to advise it. And then I realized, one, it's bigger than I thought. We're just very secretive about our numbers, so most people don't know how big the business is. The people, like working with Chris, he's so humble yet so mission driven, and it quickly changed from, why would I jump from these billion-dollar brands to something small, to, I'd be crazy not to be all in on this business with a product that I love, with people that inspire me, with a mission that is aligned with
Love
mine. I
it.
want to live long and strong. I'm one of these people that is all into longevity and want to do everything I can, but I'm also a busy mom of two kids now under 6, and a company that
I
provides
know.
really healthy, crazy high quality and simple
Boom.
solution is changing lives. It's changing lives. And
Changing lives.
this is my way to change the world, very literally. And so when he said, come on board and help me build this, took me a
Made
couple months.
sense.
By October of 21, I was all in, president, COO, board member. It'll be
And
2 years coming up. It's already been 2 years since I've been advising, but 2 years in this role coming up.
there we go. I get to use my button there.
It's amazing. It's
I
a
love
very
it.
special product
So
and company.
so let's bring it home here. A couple of quick questions to wrap this up, Kat, because I know you got to go in a minute. Biggest challenge right now in front of you as a leader of Athletic Greens?
We're a global, fully remote company. We've never had a headquarters in 12 years. And so maintaining our incredible growth in customers and revenue and in people, while building culture in a fully remote company, I like to say, I wouldn't do it any other way. Like, this works for us. We know what we're doing, but we do pay a remote tax. And so
What's
now,
that tax?
um, everything people would think, right? You're not in the same room.
So,
And
so it does matter, right? So the thread out there and the thought is that, like, remote 100% works all the time. That's not always true. There's nuances and there's things that are missing
none
of
of the
that human
models
connection.
none of the models are complete. If you force people to be there all the time, you don't get the
No,
best talent, you don't get the flexibility the modern world demands. If you're completely separate, we get together quite a bit with our leadership teams at AG, but even that requires travel. And that's fun sometimes, but that can also have its own tax. And it's less about remote and more that we're global. we're on every time zone. And so
Right.
coordinating that work
Following the sun.
takes a level of intentionality and precision and technological enablement.
Made in New Zealand.
Made in New Zealand, blended in New Zealand and blended in the US. We've got both. And it's wild. And so that just in talent, right? Like it's
Love
all
it.
about the who and
That's
people,
my world. I get it.
about the who.
It's
And
all about the
just
who.
because someone was a great fit when we were doing 50 million doesn't mean they were the best fit at 200 million, and so on and so on and so on.
I absolutely love it. So let's bring it home here, Kat. I mean, you've told the AG story a million times. I really love our conversation today because we talked about your career journey. Hopefully, you were able to talk about some things maybe you didn't go that deep on other shows. And hopefully, my audience who does not know you, now they know you a bit. Kat, what is the single greatest piece of advice you ever received that you take action on daily? It could be a mantra, something you wake up saying to get you going and moving and motivated.
It's my pinned tweet. Do we still call them tweets now that it's X? I don't know. My something.
Whatever the hell you want to
It's
call
in
it.
that place. It's pinned. And it is a version of what
Musk.com.
my mom used to put on my birthday cards, which is don't forget where you came from, but don't you dare ever let it solely define you. And I it's about reinvention. It's about evolution. And I now
Amen.
add our truth is in our roots, but our past should not be our anchor. So whether it's my personal reinvention, like I worked at Hooters, and that didn't mean that I felt I couldn't be an advocate for women, and I was the chair of the board of the Women's Food Service Forum. I was the president of Cinnabon, but now I
Hmm.
run one of the fastest growing nutrition companies in the world. Those things are not in conflict, right? I'm a person on a journey, and I have permission to change. You have permission to change. Sometimes you have a responsibility to change, like my mom's story. And so I put in practices in my life that allow me to honor that mantra. I have check ins with my husband and with my direct reports, and we ask the same 6 questions every month. I practice something called the hotshot rule every Sunday, where I envision someone I admire in my role. I ask what's one thing they do differently to make the business better. I take action on that thing in 24 hours
Love
when
it.
I get my team. And it's
So
about
good.
driving constant growth and reinvention.
I absolutely love it. I'm going to throw a curveball question in there. Planning to get back to Burning Man one of these days?
I leave in 3 days.
There it is. And Chris and I have been talking. I'm Burning Man adjacent. Chris and I are planning next year to go for the first time together, and we'll talk about that offline. But last but not least, Cat Cole, last but not least, you look back on your life, you look back on this journey, and you think about those times when you were young and you were at rock bottom and you had to pull yourself up and harness that inner tenacity and drive you forward. And you sit here today, gratitude, deep, real, true freaking gratitude, respect, admiration for this family, life, career that you built, empowering others to have careers, being a strong advocate for women and leadership. Kat Cole, what is your compass? What is your focus? What is your North Star in life?
My North Star is I help people realize they're capable of more than they know. That's it. And I do it in different ways. Sometimes I do it by being a franchisor. Sometimes I do it by being a mom or a friend. Sometimes I do it by hiring someone and giving them a shot. Sometimes I do it by firing someone and helping them find their next thing. That's been my why for as long as I can remember thinking about my purpose or my why.
And there it is, folks. Kat Cole, hang with me for one moment here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time, your wisdom, your vulnerability, and sharing with my audience. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And for everyone out there, you can follow Kat at Kat Cole on Instagram, Kat Cole ATL in the Hotlanta. Company page, drinkag1.com /cat or cat /cat in there. I'll link it up in the comments. You know where to find her. Kat, thank you so much. And everyone out there, if this show meant something to you, leave a review, rating. It goes a long way. Sharing means caring. Remember, find out more at thepozcast.com. Follow us on the social media channels. You know what they are. Take care of each other. Be good to yourself. Be better to others. And catch us next week for another great episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.